it's Marianne and welcome to my Oasis Life. In this video, I'll talk about the different varieties of pothos and how to tell them apart. Pothos are arguably the most popular houseplant. They're very common and affordable, easy to care for and propagate, they're indoor air purifiers, and looks good in any part of a home interior decor, from dorms to offices to apartments and homes. They're native to the island of Maria in French Polynesia, but has also become native to many Pacific islands, Southeast Asian countries, and found as houseplants worldwide. I personally have mine on my green wall, on my plant shelf, and on my dresser, as they give me the indoor jungle vibe that I love. Pothos are often mistaken for philodendrons and vice versa, probably because they both belong to the family of aerium or aroids. There's also Scindapsus pictus varieties that the houseplant community considers as or referred to as pothos, but that's likely because in the early 1900s, pothos are classified as Scindapsus aurea. The current classification of pothos is Epipremnum aurum. But don't worry about scientific names or classifications, don't let that confuse you. To make it easier, I categorize the different varieties of pothos into three groups: Epipremnum, Philodendron, and Scindapsus. The first and largest group is Epipremnum because technically pothos are officially classified as Epipremnum aurum. For most Epipremnums, the basic shape of the leaf is narrow heart-shaped leaf. There are also vining plants, and while you can put them up on a moss pole or train them to go up on a trellis, they're actually not climbing plants. There's about a dozen varieties of Epipremnums that I'm going to talk about in this group, but the main ones are the golden or jade pothos, neon pothos, marble queen pothos, mandula pothos, and enjoy pothos, while the rest are the highly variegated, hybrid, or cultivar versions of those 5 or 6 that I've mentioned. So the very first one is none other than the golden pothos. Golden pothos is the most common one of all pothos. They are mostly green with some yellow variegation in them. While the jade pothos is completely green without any variegation, golden pothos are actually more commonly sold. Pothos in low light, like in very dark understories in the wild, can still remain very green, which I suspect is the case for the jade pothos. But when more light is introduced to them, the yellow or the golden variegation comes out. And that's probably why golden pothos are the most common of all pothos. The next one is the marble queen pothos. The marble queen pothos is actually the very first pothos that I got, and the one that made me realize there's more than one variety of pothos. It retains the same shape of leaf as the golden pothos, but its variegation is a mix of green, light green, and white. The variegation is not consistent in every leaf, but there's like a watercolor splash pattern to them. So for example, sometimes the leaves, one side is completely green and the other side is white with some green splashes on them. The next one is the mandula pothos. If you're new to pothos, it's very hard to identify marble queen from mandula pothos. And in 25 Days of Plantmas, I did a video on how to tell the mandula pothos and marble queen pothos apart. So if you want a more in-depth video, then you can go watch it up here. The link is up in the cards and also down in the description. But the main way to tell the difference between the mandula pothos and marble queen pothos is not through their variegation, which is like 90% similar, but it's through the shape of their leaves. For the most part, the shape of the mandula pothos is wider and rounder compared to the marble queen pothos, and the variegation also follows the shape of the leaf. So the next one is the neon pothos. The neon pothos is basically the same as the jade pothos. It's just that color is neon or lime green or chartreuse in color. When the leaves are young, like over here, it's more neon yellow, but as they mature, they go a bit darker into this neon green, but it's still brighter and lighter in color in comparison to the golden or jade pothos. So this is the golden pothos and this is the neon pothos. Next one is enjoy pothos. Enjoy pothos also has green and white variegations in it, but instead in splashes, it comes in a more solid color, kind of like this one. And the pattern of its variegation is often the green is in the middle and the white is on the outside, and there's no splashes to them. The enjoy pothos often gets confused with another variety, which is the pearls and jade pothos or the glacier pothos. That is because the pearls and jade pothos is a hybrid of the marble queen and enjoy pothos. So with the pearls and jade pothos, you can see the similarities with the enjoy pothos when it comes to the variegation, green on the inside and white on the outside, but in its white variegation parts, it also has splashes of green like we see in marble queen pothos. So that's how you tell it is a pearls and jade pothos and not an enjoy pothos. But when you buy them in big box stores or maybe even in nurseries, you can find some enjoy pothos mixed in with the pearls and jade pothos. Like with the case of this one, there are some enjoy pothos mixed in with the rest of the pearls and jade pothos. So the next one is the Jessenia pothos, which is a cultivar from Costa Farms. It looks like a highly variegated golden pothos. There's about a pretty good mix of medium green and chartreuse variegation in the plant. If making a comparison, jade pothos is the completely green one, golden pothos is the one that has like splashes of yellow variegation in it, and Jessenia pothos is the one that has a pretty good mix of medium green and yellow or chartreuse variegation in them. I don't have a Jessenia pothos, but I do have a cutting of it over here, if I can show it to you. Yeah, so I have a cutting of it over here. I don't know if you can really tell because it has only one very small leaf right now, but as you can see from the stem, which pretty much tells you the kind of variegation the leaf wood has, it is very mixed with the green and chartreuse colors on the stem. So you know when the leaves comes out, it's going to be a Jessenia. So a Jessenia would probably look something like this as well. But this one is a golden pothos. So with a little bit more yellow variegation, that is a Jessenia pothos. Likewise, the Snow Queen pothos looks a lot like the Marble Queen pothos, but the Snow Queen pothos variegation tends to be a little bit more consistent than the Marble Queen pothos, and it has a lot more white variegation in it. So I could look for a leaf that looks like a Snow Queen pothos. So this one mostly has like white variegation in it with splashes of green. So if you get a Snow Queen pothos plant, most of the leaves would look like this, very white with green splashes on them, where Marble Queen pothos tend to have a little bit more variety in its variegation. Harlequin pothos also looks very, very similar to Manjula pothos, kind of like what the Snow Queen is to the Marble Queen and Jessenia pothos is to the Golden pothos. Harlequin pothos looks like a very variegated version of Manjula pothos with a lot of white variegation in it. The way to differentiate between the two is the Manjula pothos tend to have green, white variegations with them in different shades, while the Harlequin pothos tends to be more solidly green and solidly white, kind of like the Enjoy pothos. And the white variegation in Harlequin pothos, as you can see in this photo, is very prominent in the plant. Variegated neon pothos has also been popping up in the market, which is basically a neon pothos that has some yellow or darker green variegation in it. So my neon pothos is actually two plants I put into one. And I suspect one of the plants is actually variegated because I can see, if I look closely, it's not very prominent, but I can see some variegation in them, like with this one. And I also seen it in the new growth of the plants, like with this one. Well, so you can see there's like a darker green variegation on the rim of this leaf. And last but not the least in this group of epipremnums is the Cebu Blue pothos. The Cebu Blue pothos is actually not an epipremnum arum, but an epipremnum pinnatum. And this is native to the Philippines. It's named after the city of its origin, Cebu, which is located in the Visayas region in the Philippines. The leaves look longer than most of other pothos, and it has a texture to it. The leaves are green, but there's like a blue undertone to them. And if you can get the Cebu Blue pothos to mature and trail up, it could actually have fenestrations. Steve's leaves have been growing mature Cebu Blue pothos in their greenhouse, and they managed to get their mature Cebu Blue pothos to fenestrate. And last I've heard, they've started to propagate them for future sale. So I believe that Cebu Blue pothos, the mature fenestrated ones, will be one of the hottest plants, if not the hottest plant in 2020. And it's going to be like the Hunger Games in the houseplant community once the mature and fenestrated Cebu Blue pothos becomes available on the Steve's Leaves website. So if you're one of those highly anticipating the mature and fenestrated Cebu Blue pothos from Steve's Leaves, may the odds be ever in your favor. So those are the different types of pothos that are classified as epipremnums. But as I mentioned earlier, there are philodendrons and Scindapsuses that are commonly referred to or considered as pothos within the houseplant community. So let's go over them, starting with philodendrons. So philodendrons that vine are often mistaken as or referred to as pothos. The vining philodendrons have a wider and rounder heart-shaped leaves compared to epipremnum arum pothos, and they do have the ability to climb up and not just trail. When they are growing new leaves, they tend to point or grow up in search of something to grab onto. And when the leaves are young, they are peach in color, as well as their stems are peach in color, but as they mature, they become more green or into the variegation that they have as mature plants. So the first one is the heartleaf philodendron or philodendron scandens. This one is basically the same as the jade pothos. It's all green. It has no variegation in it. The only difference is in the shape of their leaves. The same way with the philodendron neon or philodendron lemon lime, its color looks exactly like of the neon pothos, but has the same shape of leaf as the philodendron scandens or heartleaf philodendron. And the philodendron mican looks exactly the same as the heartleaf philodendron as well, but its leaves are darker green in color and sometimes even burgundy, and the texture of the leaf has a velvety texture to them. The next three philodendrons I'm going to talk about are also very similar with each other and a bit harder to tell apart than the first three that I mentioned. So this one is the philodendron brasil. And this philodendron brasil is green with yellow lime variegation in it that is not always consistent. More often, the variegation comes in from the middle like this. And sometimes you'll get leaves that are completely lemon lime and narrow like this one. So here's another one that is like almost completely lime. And you could also get variegation that is half green and half lime. So the variegation is not consistent, but it's mostly lemon lime variegation that is coming from the middle. And the next one is the philodendron rio, which is a sport of the philodendron brasil. Its variegation is a bright silver and white that comes from the center instead of the lemon lime. And the other one is the philodendron gabi or philodendron cream splash, which looks exactly like the philodendron brasil, but instead of the lemon lime variegation, it has white or cream variegation in its leaves. So the last group of pothos is the Scindapsus, and as mentioned earlier, pothos in the early 1900s were classified as Scindapsus aureus, but the plants I'm talking about in this category are still classified as Scindapsus pectus. And to make it a little bit more confusing, Scindapsus pectus are often sold as silver philodendrons in most big box stores and nurseries. So yeah. But Gabriela Plants put out a Scindapsus ID guide on their Instagram, which I often refer to and is very helpful. And their common distinctive feature is the silvery, glittery variegation that's splashed in varying degrees on their very green leaves. The Scindapsus pectus leaves feels a little bit hardier and thicker than compared to philodendron and the epipremnum, and their leaves are a little bit narrower than the philodendron but are wider than the epipremnums. This is the only Scindapsus that I have, which is the Scindapsus pectus argyrius, and also my favorite one among the Scindapsuses. And the first time I bought a Scindapsus pectus argyrius, it was labeled a silver philodendron, and you can watch in this video up here me being confused on what this plant is actually called. And there's the silvery Ann, which has the same size of leaves as the Scindapsus pectus argyrius, but has more silver variegation in it. And the leaves would have more silver than green in them. Meanwhile, the silver satin looks like a larger version of the Scindapsus pectus argyrius, and the pattern of its silver variegation, it's more mosaic and pixelated-like compared to the one in the Scindapsus pectus argyrius. And last but not the least is the Scindapsus pectus exotica, which looks like a larger version of the silvery Ann, which also has a lot of silver variegation in it, but in my opinion, it's more consistent with its pattern compared to the silvery Ann. And as houseplant enthusiasts, the differences among varieties matter. If you really want to get the specific variety, and you want to make sure you're getting the right one, especially some of these varieties are more expensive and less common than others, and sellers often mislabel them, whether intentionally or not. But at the same time, this also shows that you don't really have to have all of them if you're a plant collector, especially if you're like a pothos collector like me, because at some point they all look very the same to the untrained eye. Especially for the highly variegated ones, if you cannot give them or keep up with the conditions that they need to keep their variegation, then your snow queen is just going to look like your marble queen, and your philodendrons and Scindapsuses are going to be very hard to tell apart from each other. I hope you find this helpful in learning the different varieties of pothos and how to tell them apart. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. I will have a complete guide to pothos all through this month. In my next pothos video, I will tell you all you need to know on how to properly take care of your pothos. They are very easy care plants, but they're not impossible to kill, as I found out for myself the hard way when I killed a golden pothos that was 2 years old and was already trailing 3 feet. But I've since learned my lessons, and I'm very happy to share with you my knowledge on how to properly care for and how to grow healthy pothos. Following that video, I will show you how to propagate your pothos to make them look fuller, trail longer, and have bigger leaves. But if you're watching this from the future and already have those videos up, I will put them up here But if not, for the meantime, you could watch this latest videos from me. And if you're new, I hope you subscribe and also follow me on Instagram at @myoasislife for more houseplant and sustainable lifestyle content from me. Thanks for watching. I see you, I appreciate you, and have a plentiful day. Bye!